Hello, my name is Anthony Keller, and I'm that Deacon on YouTube. Last month, I decided to do a two-part series answering a statement someone made on Episcopalians on Facebook. The person said, "I think I want to become a deacon." And that set me on the road for these past two episodes on the YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed last month's effort, and I gave you a couple of suggestions. One of them, which was to go online and find out your Myers-Briggs personality type. Did you do it? You know, I don't get that many comments down in the box below where people are allowed to comment. I wish subscribers would do that so I know if you took my advice or you'd like to make other comments. So let's assume that you did it. I hope you find it very interesting. And the other thing I suggested for you to do was to begin a book entitled Falling Upward by Father Richard Rohr. I think that's a good way to get started with the process of contemplation, which is a little bit different and I think more important than attempting to use the vague term discernment. This month, I'd like to focus a little bit more and keep the parameters a little tighter around the statement, "I think I want to become a deacon." The best way for me to do it is to share a little bit about my experience at the parish that eventually asked me if I would be interested in looking into the possibility of ordination. That church, which eventually raised me up to servant leadership. But I'd like to go all the way back to the beginning. Now, I was raised up from a community in Huntington Beach, California. The name of that parish is St. Wilfrid of York. The reason I chose that church was quite interesting because I went online and I checked to see if that church had a GLBT ministry, and they did. So I ended up attending that church. Not too long after I arrived for a few Sundays, I kept a lookout in the announcement section, and their GLBT ministry held a potluck. So I just showed up. Luckily, the rector of the church was at that particular potluck. He would sometimes be there, depended on what he had going on. But that month, he attended the potluck, and I met a group of really nice, welcoming people. And so that clinched it. I decided to become a member of that parish. After a few more months of just regular attendance, I received in the mail, maybe I'd been there about 3 or 4 months, I received an interesting letter in the mail. The rector sent me a letter saying that he had met with a group of people within the church, and they asked me to become involved in an intercessory prayer ministry. It was their plan during communion to have what they called prayer partners. And these prayer partners would be stationed in the chapel, which is in that church in the back of the church. It's a separate area, but it opened up with French doors to the main sanctuary. I was a little bit surprised by that because I hadn't spoken with that many people. I mean, yes, I did during coffee hour, and I attended the potlucks for the GLBT group, but they said that they had discerned in me a quality that would be good for intercessory prayer. Well, I thought, that's quite interesting. So I ended up going to the meeting, and I indeed did give up my time for that group, which involves some training on what intercessory prayer does and what it doesn't, and how best to pray with people and all of that stuff. By this time, I was a couple years into my membership at St. Wilfrid of York, and as to me, it seemed a logical extension to move and to keep doing intercessory prayer with people. I think we were scheduled once or twice a month. We didn't have to do it every Sunday. There was an opening for lay Eucharistic visitors. I had gotten to know a number of people by praying with them, and so to me it seemed a logical thing to then move into taking communion to the sick and the infirm. So I became a lay Eucharistic visitor. I then eventually from that moved into becoming a person up at the altar, an MC, Master of Ceremonies for the service. So I would not only on some Sundays be Master of Ceremony, I would also do my home Eucharistic visits. Now I have to share something here that is quite important. In the case of becoming a prayer partner and also becoming a person who was at the welcome table, a greeter, the lay Eucharistic visit ministry, all of those I was asked by people involved to be a part of that ministry. It wasn't something that I actively sought. In time, I was also asked if I would be interested in becoming a small group leader. So I entered training and learned the ins and outs of small group leadership. Then along the way, I ended up writing some music for our summer vacation Bible school. And I became the de facto MC for that group for about 3 years. Again, this was the church that came to me, knowing my background in music and theater, and said, hey, I think you'd be good at this. Would you be willing to donate your time? And of course, I said yes, and I did it. So basically, I was just an active member of the parish who kept getting called by my community to do certain things. Then as time progressed, I started to become a little bit restless with the GLBT ministry. But I noticed that our group was more about potlucks than really doing anything. Yes, once a year we participated in AIDS Walk Orange County, but even that to me seemed lacking, because I felt that GLBT people within the church needed to do some active evangelism, to have some open dialogue with those who have shunned the church because of the traditional stance that people had only been aware of. So one day at our meeting, I suggested that we put together a booth for the AIDS Walk festival they had. There was a big festival on the grounds in Orange County. Groups would do the big walk, and they would come back and end at the festival. So I said, I've seen a number of nonprofits there, the typical ones you might see at a gay pride parade, but there's not a church presence there. So why don't I call them to see if they would let us have a booth? And sure enough, they said, fine, we have no problem with that. So we had a booth there for a number of years with a big banner that said, "Reclaim your faith." And we were the only church that was at that booth. And we handed out a lot of literature and met some very nice people. And I think when I left St. Wilfrid to begin my ministry out at St. George's in La Cañada, I think by that time at the festival, there were now 4 or 5 churches who began to have booths at that thing. But E-Flags from St. Wilfrid was the first to do that. And then I started to think about other things that I would like to promote. As my faith grew and I started to sense the call of action and getting people involved. And so Thanksgivings had become sort of a drag. A lot of the traditions that my parents held were no longer being done because of death and infirmity. And so Thanksgiving now was sort of blech. It wasn't anything fun. So I went, why don't I start a Thanksgiving dinner at the church? Maybe there's a lot of people like me who really have no place to go or no place they want to go. That was the important word. No place they want to go for a Thanksgiving dinner. So I called it the place to go where you have no place you want to go, Thanksgiving dinner. And the first year I held it in the little bunkhouse we had. St. Wilfrid used to be a working ranch in the early days, and they still had a little bunkhouse that had become the de facto youth group building. But it was more like a living room, and it had a pool table and couches and chairs. And so I put up flyers. Of course, I got permission to do it. We had a lovely kitchen at the church, a state-of-the-art restaurant-type kitchen. So I had plenty of room. And I had, I believe, 15 or 16 people who came to that dinner. Some of them were students from the local university in Irvine. Some of them had relatives that they couldn't stand, or they were running away from Uncle Joe, whose only Thanksgiving tradition was to drink too much and get nasty with other people. So everybody had their own reason to be there. And so we had a great time. And before I left, I had done it for 3 years. And my very last year, I believe we had close to 65 people that came to our Thanksgiving dinner. It didn't cost anyone a cent. We took donations. I believe the food was already paid for by the time we finished with our donations. Just people kicked in what they wanted to. Then one day, we had a substitute priest that was filling in for a few weeks. It was a priest I didn't know. And she pulled me aside after maybe I had served as MC for one of the services and I was going off to coffee hour. And she pulled me aside and said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a priest?" And I looked right at her and began laughing and said, "Oh, no, I am not a priest. There is no way." I'm just not. I can tell. I've been through this before. She didn't know that I had been through discernment when I was a Roman Catholic to consider the priesthood, and I figured out I wasn't a priest. And but that got me thinking, and it was, I believe, divine providence that led me to look at the different orders within the church. And I found out that there had been a revival of the diaconate. So I started to research that, and then went, I'm not a priest, but I think this is a ministry that is matching with who I am. And that's the important thing I want to get across today. I was trying to show you that you don't become a deacon. You are a deacon, and the church recognizes it. At that point, many priests did not even know that the diaconate had been revived, or that this ministry was strong enough to exist. But as I began to look back at my life then, not only the things I had done at St. Wilfrid, I then started to look back on my life, almost like in the 12 steps, you're asked to take a moral inventory. I started to look at myself and take a service to others inventory, and went, golly gee williker, I think I am a deacon. I would like to share a book right now that was given to me in the very, very early stages. Once I had made my questions known, once I had gone to clergy and said that this other priest had suggested I seek ordination, and I think I had discovered the diaconate, but I still don't know much about what the diaconate is. But I had said I had looked back on my life, and I think this might be who I am. They suggested a book for me to read, and I have found that this book is really good for anyone who is a little bit confused about who they are and what type of work they would like to do in the world that would be fulfilling, that would show their fullness as a human being. It's by Parker J. Palmer, and it's called Let Your Life Speak, Listening to the Voice of Vocation. And vocation is more than just a spiritual or a vocation that is within the church. You've seen many people who have a vocation. Doctors have a vocation. Lawyers have a vocation. A great chef has a vocation, because it is the fulfillment of who they are internally that expresses itself externally. Parker J. Palmer admits in this that this book is built upon a poem. It's by Mary Sarton, and as he writes, evokes the quest for vocation, at least my quest for vocation, with candor and precision. Here's the opening stanza. Now I become myself. It has taken time, many years and places. I have been dissolved and shaken, warn other people's faces. You see, the church merely recognizes and upholds who you are, and then says yes to your ministry for the greater church. And in the case of ordination, this is done while you're in an ordered relationship with your bishop. That's what ordination is. But basically, the greater church is looking to you, a person who is already formed, to say, yes, we like what you're doing. Now do it in our name. So, I think I'll become a deacon? Not really. I would hope, in most people's case, you are a deacon, and the wider church recognizes it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was informative. Now, going hand in hand with our series that I've been talking about, I think there's another element I would like to add that is separate but equal within the idea of contemplation and a spiritual assessment of who you are. One person that can help you with this, and it should not all be done alone, is called a spiritual director. And so I hope next month, cross your fingers. It's always hard to get people locked down to do videos sometimes. But next month, I'd like to hopefully have a conversation with a spiritual director to give you the ins and outs of what it's like to enter spiritual direction, which is good not only for lay people and anyone who wishes to have a person to walk alongside you as your partner in your spiritual journey. It can help you if you're considering seeking ordination as well. So next month, let's talk about spiritual direction. But for this month, I hope this has been informative. God bless. See you next month. Stay well and get out there and become the deacon we all know you can be, lay or ordained. Go out there, do some good.